Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to break down something pretty specific. It's a detailed theological interpretation of end times prophecy, coming straight out of the biblical book of Daniel. We're talking about a precise day-by-day timeline for what some believe are Earth's final 7 years. So let's just dive right in and walk through this framework slide by slide and see how it all pieces together. Okay, so this whole thing really kicks off with a massive question. What if there's a literal day-by-day timeline for the final 7 years of this age? The belief system we're exploring today isn't about some vague, fuzzy outline. Nope, it's about a precise prophetic clock ticking down to a final conclusion. All right, so the whole foundation for this timeline, it comes from the prophet Daniel, and it's built on a concept known as the last week.
Now, according to this interpretation, this week isn't symbolic. It's understood as a literal countdown. We're talking 2,520 days. You get that by taking 7 years and multiplying it by a 360-day biblical year. And this is the period that's believed to contain all the final events.
So, the most crucial question is, what starts this 2,520-day clock? I mean, a countdown is pretty useless if you don't know when to start it, right? Well, the source we're looking at argues that it's a single, observable, and totally unmistakable act. So what is that trigger event? What starts the clock? This interpretation points to one specific, unmistakable moment, and it all hinges on a prophecy about a holy place. This verse from the Gospel of Matthew is seen as the absolute key. The appearance of this abomination of desolation, well, that's interpreted as the starting gun for those final 7 years. Now, what's important here is that this interpretation doesn't see the abomination as just, some abstract idea or a system. No, it's a specific person, the son of perdition. And his big move, he walks into a physical temple, sits down, and declares that he is God. That's the moment. That's when the countdown begins. Okay, but this brings up a really fascinating and very specific requirement. For this prophecy to happen as described, a physical temple would need to be rebuilt in Jerusalem first. And not only that, but the practice of animal sacrifice would have to start up again. According to this view, without that temple, the trigger event, it just can't happen. So once that clock starts ticking, this interpretation says things get really intense really fast. We enter a period of targeted persecution against believers. And this is what's known as the Great Tribulation. And this isn't about, random earthquakes or floods. Nope. This period, which lasts 42 biblical months, is a very targeted affliction. It all centers around being forced to worship this son of perdition, and there are some pretty severe consequences for anyone who refuses. To really get what's going on here, you gotta know the players on the field. The main bad guy is the son of perdition. He's backed up by something called the Red Beast, which is interpreted as a kind of world government. And that government is controlled by a religious system called the Babylon Harlot. But on the other side, fighting against them, you have the two witnesses, a group of 144,000 individuals whose job it is to protect believers. And these two witnesses, they have a really critical job during this whole mess. They're out there warning people not to take the 666 mark. They're preaching their own message. And get this, they have the power to protect the faithful from the beast's forces, even creating a safe haven for them. So let's update our timeline here. That first half, the first 1,260 days, it's all defined by this conflict, this clash between the beast's forces and the saints who are being protected by the two witnesses. But here's the thing. This period of suffering for believers, it isn't supposed to last the entire 7 years. According to this view, it has a very specific, pre-planned end date, a day of deliverance. And that brings us to a really important number, a moment of profound hope that's highlighted in this interpretation, day 1,335. And there's this verse in the book of Daniel that says, "Blessed is he who waits and arrives at the 1335 days." This isn't just seen as some nice spiritual encouragement. It's taken as a promise of a literal, physical rescue from everything that's going on. And that's because this day is believed to be the moment of the first resurrection. The idea is that on this exact day, believers are literally caught up in the air, removed from the earth entirely. It's like God shortens the days of their suffering by just physically taking them out of harm's way before the really bad stuff begins. And this is where you see a total flip in the script. The entire focus of who is suffering, it completely reverses. The first part was about the saints suffering persecution for their faith. The second part, that's about the beast worshippers suffering because of divine judgment. Okay, so the believers are gone, they've been rescued. Now the whole dynamic on earth changes from persecution to straight-up divine judgment. And this is the part of the story where God's wrath is poured out on the kingdom of the beast. A series of 7 really devastating plagues hits the planet. And there's this internal conflict, too. The world government, that red beast, apparently turns on its religious controller, the Babylon harlot, and just destroys it. So when we look back at our timeline, we can finally fill in the whole picture. That second half, from day 1335 to the very end on day 2520, is all about these plagues and these acts of judgment, and it's all leading to one final showdown. And this period of judgment doesn't just, fizzle out. It builds up to a final, massive, decisive sequence of events that brings the whole 2,520 days to a dramatic close. The source lays out a really clear step-by-step endgame. First, the beast's armies all gather at Armageddon. That triggers the return of Jesus Christ, who then judges the beast and his false prophet. Then, Satan himself is locked away for 1,000 years, which paves the way for the very last step, a complete cosmic reset, a new heaven and a new earth. So, what are we supposed to take away from all this? Well, the point here isn't to say this is definitely going to happen. It's to understand one really intricate, detailed system of belief. This day-by-day timeline gives its followers a clear map for what they see as a chaotic future. And that leaves us with a really fascinating question to think about. No matter what you believe, what does the appeal of such a precise, detailed, prophetic clock tell us about our deep human need for certainty and meaning in a world that so often feels uncertain?